Don't you just hate it when a movie starts getting a ton of praise online and suddenly everybody on TikTok becomes a film critic for like 2 weeks? You open your phone and it's like, this movie changed my life, this is the scariest movie ever made, this movie traumatized me, this is cinema, blah blah blah. And then you finally watch the movie and it's just fine? Yeah, well anyway, Obsession is one of the best horror films I've ever seen. No, seriously, I genuinely have not stopped thinking about this movie since I walked out of the theater. And the craziest part is that I was actually kinda late to the party with this one. I didn't watch Obsession opening weekend, I didn't even watch it during its first week. I only just saw it like yesterday, that's 2 weeks after release, because I kept seeing people online talking about it non-stop. And at first I ignored it, because honestly, horror hype online is usually the fastest way for me to become skeptical about a movie. Especially on TikTok. And every horror movie becomes the scariest movie ever made for like 3 days before everybody moves on to the next thing. But with Obsession, the hype just kept growing and growing, and eventually I got too curious. So I went to see it, and after the first 10 minutes, I was locked the fuck in. Like, completely locked in. And the thing that shocked me most about Obsession is that it understands something most modern horror movies completely fail at. Tension. Not jump scares, not loud noises, not random creepy imagery. Real tension. This movie understands how to make you genuinely uncomfortable in a way that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. From the moment this movie really starts moving, you never fully relax again. Even during scenes that should feel normal, even during conversations, even during quiet moments, you're still sitting there with your hands half covering your face because you genuinely have no idea what this movie is about to throw at you next. And that unpredictability becomes terrifying. The tension in this movie is built so unbelievably well that I found myself physically exhausted by the end of it. And I mean that in the biggest compliment possible, because Obsession doesn't rely on cheap horror tricks. It slowly tightens itself around you, scene by scene. And the biggest reason why that works so well is Indy Navarrete. She is absolutely unbelievable in this movie. Every single time Nikki appeared on screen, I got nervous. And not because the movie necessarily tells you something bad is about to happen, but because her performance constantly makes you feel like something is wrong. There's this anxiety in the way she acts, this emotional unpredictability. And it makes every scene involving her deeply uncomfortable to watch in the best way possible. She completely controls the atmosphere of this movie. And what makes her performance even better is that the longer the movie goes on, the more tragic everything becomes. Because at first, the title Obsession sounds almost vague, like, okay, obsession with what exactly? But slowly, scene by scene, you start realizing what the movie is actually talking about. And once it clicks, the entire movie becomes heartbreaking. And that's what surprised me the most. Underneath all the horror, all the anxiety, all the disturbing moments, this movie is deeply sad. And that emotional core is exactly why the horror works so well. The best horror movies are never just scary. They're about something deeper like fear or grief, control, addiction, loneliness. And Obsession understands that perfectly. The horror in this movie feels emotionally driven instead of mechanically written. Nothing feels random. Everything spirals naturally from the characters and their emotional state. And honestly, the filmmaking itself is insane. The pacing of this movie is incredible. There's basically no dead air. The film constantly moves forward while still giving scenes enough time to breathe, which is honestly hard to pull off. And a lot of horror movies either move way too slowly and become boring, or they move way too fast and completely destroy their own tension. And Obsession somehow finds this perfect middle ground, and visually, this movie looks way better than I expected. The camera work is fantastic. There are moments where the camera slowly drifts through spaces in a way that genuinely made me feel sick with anxiety. And the editing deserves just as much praise because this movie understands rhythm. It knows exactly when to hold a shot for too long and exactly when to cut away. And then there's the score, and oh my god, this score doesn't just support the movie, it invades your body. That's like the best way I can describe it. You don't just hear the music, you feel it. There were moments where the sound design and the score became so overwhelming that it honestly felt like the movie was physically pressing down on my chest. And again, I mean that as a praise. That's horror. That's what a horror movie should do. It should make you uncomfortable. It should make you anxious. It should get under your skin. And Obsession absolutely nails that. Which brings me to the person who made all of this possible, Curie Barker. I genuinely cannot believe this is his first feature film. That is so insane to me, because this does not feel like a debut movie. This feels like a horror film made by somebody who has been directing for years, and the amount of respect I have for him after watching this movie is honestly massive. Not just because the movie is great, because he made this movie at such a young age and on such a ridiculously small budget. And that makes the movie even more impressive, because Obsession never feels low budget. Sure, there are moments here and there where you can tell they had limitations, but instead of hurting the movie, those limitations actually make it feel more intimate and uncomfortable. It feels focused and very creative. And honestly, this movie is exactly why I'll always defend smaller filmmakers in original horror, because when horror is made by people with an actual vision and passion instead of like a giant studio, you get stuff like this, and audiences clearly connect with it too, because the crazy part? This movie has already made back its budget like 100 times over, which is absolutely insane, and somehow this tiny horror movie even managed to outperform The Mandalorian and Grogu at the box office, which honestly says a lot about where the audiences are right now. People want original movies, people want original filmmakers with unique voices. And horror especially has become one of the last genres where directors are still allowed to take a real creative risk. And that's why horror has been carrying cinema for years now, because horror fans reward originality, and Obsession feels incredibly original. Even when the movie uses familiar horror elements, it presents them in a way that feels fresh and deeply personal. And I think this movie is gonna become like a horror classic people keep talking about years from now, because it leaves a mark on you. And I've seen so many horror movies over the years that eventually started blending together in my brain, but Obsession feels unforgettable. There are images from this movie that are still burned into my head. Like, I had trouble sleeping last night, and not because they're graphic or shocking, but because of how emotionally disturbing they are. And I think that's what elevates this movie from really good horror to something truly special. It understands human discomfort, not just horror discomfort, but human discomfort. Like the awkwardness, the desperation, and the obsession. And as the movie keeps spiraling deeper and deeper into that mindset, you almost start feeling trapped alongside the characters. By the final act, I genuinely felt emotionally drained, and in the best way possible. And that is why I think Obsession is the biggest surprise of the year. Not because it reinvented cinema, but because a small horror movie made by a young filmmaker completely caught me off guard and delivered one of the most intense theater experiences I've had in years. This is the kind of movie that reminds me why I love cinema in the first place, because every once in a while a movie comes out of nowhere and completely grabs you, and for 2 hours straight you forget about everything else. You're just locked in, completely consumed by what's happening on screen, and that is exactly what Obsession did to me. So yeah, maybe TikTok was right this time. God, I hate admitting that.